So in this parsha, I was inspired by a character named Betzalel, who is one of the lead artisans of the Mishkan, and I was inspired to for us to look into him a little bit because he appears very briefly in our Torah. Um, and I also have a personal connection to him because the street that I lived on when I lived in Jerusalem most recently was Betzalel Street in Nachlaot. Great place, great apartment, great roommates, great year. So I feel very attached to the street of Betzalel in Jerusalem. And also, Betzalel being the artist of our Torah, there's an art school in Jerusalem which is affiliated with Hebrew University, which is called the Betzalel School of Art and Design. So we're going to look at a couple passages, both in this week's Parsha and how the rabbis in the Talmud react to this character of Betzalel. So I'm going to share my screen in just a second, and I would love, before I share, if people who are willing to read will raise their hand with the little icon here. So we have a couple people to call on. I see Sarah, thanks. Awesome. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. So I will ask Sarah Sloan to read the first three psukim that are on the first paragraph of our source sheet.
The Holy One spoke to Moses, "See, I have singled out by name Bezalel, son of Un, son of Hor, of the tribe of Yehudah. I have endowed him with the divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of craft."
Thanks. So we have God spoke to Moses and said, I have chosen this person and this is what he's going to do. I've singled him out by name. Thanks, Sarah. So this is sort of just the verses we learn about him. And then the Talmud in the Tractate of Brachot, which is about blessings, goes into why and how Bezalel was elected. So I see Stacy has her hand up. Would you read these first three lines here?
Vasel's election. Rabbi Yohanan says, the Holy Blessed One decrees three things by God's self, and these are they: famine, plenty, and a good parnas. A good parnas, as it is written. God spoke to Moshe, "See, I have singled out Bezalel by name."
Thanks, Stacy. So we have these three themes that God, decides by God's self: famine, plenty, which are both agricultural, and a good parnas. The word parnas I had a lot of fun looking it up yesterday. There's lots of definitions for the word parnas. Some argue that the role of a parnas in a community precedes anything like a rabbi. It's sort of like, imagine like an Israelite synagogue administrator who like does fundraising, makes sure everyone like has their role right, they know what the schedule is, the events calendar, the website is all tidied. A lot of the sort of civil servant or like invisible hand things in a community. That's what a parnas is. And Rabbi Yochanan says that God chose Bezalel as the Israelites' parnas. Thank you, Stacy. So we have Rabbi Yochanan as one of the polls, and then we have Rabbi Yitzchak. Is there another volunteer to read Rabbi Yitzchak, these two paragraphs? Elizabeth.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Where am I starting? Rabbi Yohan?
Right here, Rabbi Yitzchak.
Oh, Rabbi Yitzchak.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Rabbi Yitzchak said, "They do not set up a parnas over the congregation unless they consult with the congregation, as it is stated. And Moses said unto the children of Israel, See, God has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. Keep going?
Yeah.
Thank you. The Holy One said to Moses, Moses, is Bezalel a suitable appointment in your eyes? Moses said, Creator of the universe. If he is a suitable appointment in your eyes, then all the more so in my eyes. The Holy Blessed One said to him, Nevertheless, go and tell Israel and ask their opinion. Moses went and said to Israel, Is Bezalel suitable in your eyes? They said to him, If he is suitable in the eyes of the Holy Blessed One, and in your eyes, all the more is he suitable in our eyes.
Thanks.
Welcome.
So we have these like 3 levels. We have the Holy One, Moses, and the people all speaking about Bezalel's election and all kind of saying like, what do you think about him as a candidate? Is he good? I don't know. But they're like coming from God's recommendation or Moses' recommendation. So one would think that the people would just kind of fall in line. But I'm curious if someone wants to share sort of the difference they see in Rabbi Yochanan versus Rabbi Yitzchak and why it might be significant about how we appoint leaders. Could also write in the chat. Saul?
So God chooses Bezalel because Bezalel already has a good name. He doesn't have to do anything. Whatever he's been doing has made God feel that Bezalel is the right one. Everybody else is saying, if God wants this one, what are we to say? Yet we all know that when people are selected by committees and join the greater congregation, that people in the congregation go, where did they get that one? They don't quite accept the higher ups' opinion of that person.
Thanks, Saul. Yeah. Is there one, maybe max 2 more comments before we move on to our next piece of text?
You can physically wave your hand if you don't feel like, if you can't find the icon at the bottom. You can put any questions into the chat, like a question that came from Leslie Bernstein about, is there a relationship between Parnas and Parnassah?
Yes, there is. Yes, Parnassah is defined roughly as sustenance, and a Parnas is sort of a sustainer. Some people even in Jewish communities now say a Parnas is like a funder, like a major funder. Like, oh, this person's a Parnas of our shul or our yeshiva or something like that. So they do come from the same root. And I see Rabbi Joe.
Hi. This makes me think of not so much leadership, but followership, which is the idea, right, that that a leader might have followers. Like, what do you do to ensure that people are excited about like what you bring in a leadership position? And I really see that in the story in which, well, if God says it's okay, then Moses trusts God, so Moses thinks it's fine, and then the people trust Moses, and there are a lot of ways in which this could go poorly, right? Which we've seen at different historical moments, but there's something really, I think, touching that Bezalel is brought in, surrounded by trust and love and followership that already exists and relationships that have already been formed. So I like that telling.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, something that I see here is like, it's interesting in terms of the hierarchy of power. Like, God sort of consults with people who are below God's rank, but at the same time, it's sort of like there's the domino effect of the followership. But yeah, there is a tension here of the hierarchy happening and the democracy sort of happening. Thank you, Rabbi Joe, for your comment. So we have also this a question about whether Bezalel's skill comes from himself or whether it's sort of divinely given. Would someone read this, which is the same part section we read before, the same text? Would someone be open to read this in English? Stacy? Oh, and then Judy, you can read next.
Do you want the other person to read first since I've already read?
Go ahead.
Okay. That's where we're at. Rabbi Shmuel?
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, Rabbi Yonahan said Bezalel was singled out by name because of his wisdom. When the Holy One said to Moses, go say to Bezalel, make a tabernacle, an ark, and vessels. Moses went and reversed the order and told Bezalel, make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle. Bezalel said to Moses, the standard practice throughout the world is that a person builds a house and only afterwards builds the vessels in the house. And you say to me, make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle? If I do so in the order you have commanded, the vessels that I make, where shall I put them? Perhaps God told you the following, make a tabernacle, ark, and vessels. Moses said to Bezalel, perhaps you were in God's shadow and you knew precisely what God said.
Thanks, Stacy. So we have here sort of a game of telephone, that broken telephone, where God says something to Moses, said something to Bezalel, and Bezalel's like, wait, Moses, are you sure you got it that way? I think God might have said it this way. And we can see in the parentheses here, Bezalel's name comes from this piece of Talmud where it says Betzalel, the shadow of God. Tzel in Hebrew means shadow. Also interesting significance that Bezalel is the son of Uri, and Uri means my light. So we have this sort of juxtaposition between Bezalel as a son who's named the shadow of God and his father who's named my light. And we have our last piece of text, which Judy, go ahead, which is by Sforno, who's an Italian rabbi from the 1400s.
See, I called by name. Try and understand that I did not appoint Bezalel for this task arbitrarily, as it is of the essence that someone who is very senior, also in spiritual matters, must carry out such a sacred task as fashioning the parts of the tabernacle. Such a person must not only have in mind the desire to technically execute first-class artisanship, but also must constantly be conscious of performing a divine commandment.
Thanks, Judy. So we have, this is Sforno commenting on the verse that we read on the first page about why God singled out Bezalel and sort of what qualities this person might need. So my question, which is our last question, is what, in your opinion, is the balance between sort of skill belonging to the artist themselves or being divinely given? Because we see this tension a bit in these sources. Like when you see an artist, are you like, wow, that person's just genius and like God gave them a gift? Or are you like, that's totally their skill that they've honed? Sarah?
I think that God gives a person a kernel, a beginning of a skill, and then it's up to the person, in this case, Bezalel, to develop it. I also do very much understand that the person who made the vessels had to be a person of good standing and good moral character. It made me think of the Kol Nidre prayer. You would not have a Shaliach Tzibur on Kol Nidre, or actually any other time, who is not a stand-up person and an honest person.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, the kernel. And there are lots of laws about what a Shaliach Tzibur should be, or what kind of qualities they should have, what a prayer leader should be like. Jonathan?
I think it's a combination. I heard a story or a allegory once of a man died and went to heaven and was welcomed as being the best violinist of his generation. He said, "But I never picked up a violin." And God told him, "If you had, you would have found out that you were the best violinist in your generation." And so there's this idea that the talent definitely can be God-given, but you definitely need to work to hone and to bring those gifts to a practical way of doing those things. That there's an importance of the education in the arts as much as there is a kernel of a gift in it as well. It's very much both. And you can hear an artist who, like a musician who has like really, really wonderful technique, but if there's not that gift for that soul and that heart that goes into the music, it's not the same as someone who has that divine beauty in their music that also needs that technique. But it's both, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. So I appreciate everyone's comments. Thank you for people who volunteered to read. I think I was really interested in Bezalel as a character, both the election and the skill, because he feels like a very liminal character to me. I think like we're at this moment in our Torah. We've left slavery in Egypt at the beginning of the chapter of Exodus. We've just come to the end of the chapter, and the Israelites really finding their voice as a nation. So we see his election is like a mix of sort of divinely appointed and democratically appointed, or as Rabbi Hirschman said, like a followership. And his skill is like both his own. He has this wisdom, but the rabbis also say that like God gave him this skill. And I think he's at the confluence of this tension happening in our Torah, where as we're leaving the book of Exodus, the Israelites are really becoming their own nation. They're taking distance from God, or like they're sort of weaning their dependence from God. And even if they receive some kind of word, it is up to them to sort of like shape the holiness in God's that God gives them. And I think this is like one more step away from the reality in which God is the only source of sovereignty and the one who chooses, like, okay, God chose Moses and Moses is a leader. It's like a little more complicated here. And I think this is part of the arc of our Torah toward human election and toward human leadership, and leadership whose power stems from critical thinking and creative thinking, even when it comes through the divine voice. So I guess my blessing for us this Shabbat is that we can take Bezalel's complexity, the ability to hold the divine and the critical at the same time, and that Bezalel can inspire us to hold those two poles of the divine and the creative and the critical at the same time. Shabbat Shalom.